ready?
No, once you see live TV over there, then we're ready. And
There it is.
it's coming, there we are.
Good evening, and welcome to this meeting of the Old Kings Highway Committee of the Town of Yarmouth, which is being held in accordance with Chapter 470 of the Acts of 1973 as amended. This meeting is being conducted at 7:22 p.m. on Monday, January 23rd, 2023, at the Yarmouth Town Hall Hearing Room located at 1146 Route 28, South Yarmouth. Moreover, pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021, GL Chapter 3A, pages 18 to 25, considering certain COVID-19 measures, this meeting is being run in a hybrid mode. We have one tabled application that will be heard this evening. Please be reminded that our committee's main purpose is to review items for appropriateness and setting, and it is the responsibility of the applicant to comply with the regulations of other town boards and departments, including building, conservation, engineering, health, zoning, and the sign inspector. You should know that there is a 10 calendar day appeal period starting once the decision is filed with the town clerk. Any person aggrieved by our decision tonight can appeal to the Regional Commission of the Old Kings Highway. Our office administrator will be happy to answer any questions you may have regarding this process. So, the only item we have on the agenda tonight is a tabled application, and we will need to have a motion to have that untabled.
I move to untable item 22-A124, the Fuentes solar installation.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Abstain.
Aye. So,
Do we have them on
do we have
Zoom?
the applicant obviously
I
not
don't see
present,
anybody.
No, but I
available
think
on
there's a
Zoom?
couple people on, or at least one person on Zoom. Does that say Carol? Oh, that's Carol Lampton, she's viewing, and Lisa Sherman. So we don't seem to have anybody here,
Okay.
So it would seem.
so it would seem. They may have tuned in, and when there wasn't a meeting, went on to something else.
Mr. Chairman, if I may interject at this point, just, I only realized today because unfortunately I moved to my current home a year ago approximately, and they still have a Rhode Island address for me. So I am a direct abutter, and I was not notified of that. So although I'm in favor of this application, I will at this point recuse myself and step away.
Okay. So, in light of the fact that there's no presenter, we could, I believe, continue in the absence of a presentation, unless there's an objection from anybody on the
We've done
committee.
that in the past, so I think
Okay.
that.
So, how do we feel about this application?
I feel that it's on a out-of-the-way street. The panels will be on the back. There's wooded area behind it. I couldn't see anything from the front. I move to approve.
I second the motion.
Okay, I will just state parenthetically that I agree this seems like an easy decision to make, and I feel very comfortable with calling the vote. So, Liz,
I make a motion to approve 22-A124, the Fuentes solar installation.
I think, didn't we already have a motion to approve?
I move to approve.
So I'm calling,
Tabled.
I was looking.
no, I think that
Oh, beg your
Paula moved to
pardon.
approve and you seconded.
Seconded.
So I'm calling for the vote.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, motion carried.
There you go.
I would be curious, I'm sorry they're not here, I wanted to find out what the production compromise was, but that will be an unknown. Okay,
Okay,
and Richard reapproaches.
so we can't do that, but we can do this.
Mhm.
pen does not work. Thank you. Okay, so, have we all read the minutes from the January 9th meeting? And are there any comments or adjustments, edits, or other ideas? Or do we have a motion to approve the minutes?
I think there were some comments made, but,
They've all been fixed.
so I move to approve the minutes as amended from January 9th.
Well, we have a motion to approve and a second, and I'll take the vote.
Aye.
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 And aye. Minutes are approved. Other business. We have received, along with other organizations and citizens on Cape Cod, a letter from an organization known as Protect Our Past. And I'll read it into the record. To all historical commissions on Cape Cod, Protect Our Past is here to support your hard work of trying to save the historic fabric, streetscapes, and thus houses of your town. We have created a pro bono service to help you. It's called the POP Rescue Plan. POP, an acronym for Protect Our Past. Protect Our Past will schedule historic preservationists and wood experts to meet owners, builders, architects, realtors, and lawyers of historical properties to evaluate the historic assets still remaining. This is proven to give food for thought to rethink and or develop plans for restoring irreplaceable structures. There are rare occasions where the owner is surprised, there are rare occasions when one is not of historic value, and the recommendations may be to replace it. However, there are more examples where the owner is surprised to learn about their property's history. A desirable restoration is then recommended and completed. We have found that when you educate the owner, they are not only pleasantly surprised, they are also grateful to learn about their historic treasure and usually proceed without restoration.
With registration.
Excuse me, thank you, with restoration. What we have found is that until we arrive, the owners only have learned about their property from architects, builders, lawyers, and maybe someone from historical commissions. The reality is, none of these people are historic preservationists. Applying the latter is key to unveiling the historic facts about a structure. Protect Our Past offers this service to you at no cost. When a house is up for demolition or even before them, contact me and I will step in to make this offer to those involved. This includes attending a historical commission meeting to address the situation. You may want to ask your commission to vote on taking the step before addressing the demolition request. Then I will schedule the appropriate historic preservationist and or wood specialist to evaluate the historic house in question. We invite the owner, builder, architect, lawyer, and historical commission to attend. Please take advantage of this service. We have a high success rate. Feel free to call me with any questions. Her phone number, gratefully, Ellen. I believe Ellen is president. Ellen Briggs is president of Protect Our Past. And I'll open it up for comments, thoughts, and observations about this, opinions.
Well, I asked this to be put on the agenda when we got the email. Now, Ellen, I believe, was here, was she not? I'm not familiar with the two people. There was one person from Yarmouth Historical, I believe, and then another person. She may have been, does anybody know? Was that Ellen herself?
I've seen her, I can't remember in what context and with regard to what application.
Okay.
I believe no, I'll take that back. She spoke about the barn.
Yes,
on
okay.
Church Street.
And that's what I
And
was
that was, to my recollection, the only time that I have seen her present at one of these meetings.
So we didn't act on that request for demolition. We denied it, which put it into circulation until it can be reapplied for demolition. And when I saw this, I just wondered, I don't know, and it's not our job, clearly, but is there any action that we could take to try to help preserve this barn?
Well, before we jump into the preserving
Yeah.
the barn, or what we can take, what action we can take, let's stay focused on this for a minute.
I think it's a good idea to have somebody who's in that position to intercede and maybe enlighten a homeowner as to what they've got.
Well, she was here that night and trying to enlighten him, is what I'm realizing.
Well, if I may add, as a preservation architect, one of the things I've found over my career is that builders want to build, and people usually or often go to a builder. They are not preservationists and usually do not think in those terms. Same thing with architects. Most architects want to design a house. Often they are misdirected, and they are things that are thought of as being not savable. Wood that is damaged is dismissed as being something that has to be demolished, which is not the case, and generally, most usually, not the case. So I think this is a really admirable cause, and I love the idea of using them as a resource. And recommending them to throwing things their way in the hope that a building could be saved. Because as Ellen wrote, people are often, I don't think it's willfully, but misdirected. There are often other solutions, and usually a building can be saved if one wants to save it. So I think it's a really admirable cause, and we should pursue it, do whatever we could do to
The
support
other
them.
thing, just, was that application that we denied, was that appealed?
No, I
No.
don't believe so.
Has not been appealed.
But I also, I think there was another email that came across at this, almost the same time, and I may be getting them confused, that had money attached, a grant that you could get for the preservation. So I need to go back to my emails, but I know we're all favored, and of course Cindy was here and she was very outspoken and concerned about the loss of this barn. Everybody was. But I really don't know what action we can take.
Well,
Well, doesn't she
first of all,
suggest
we
this-
have, in the past, offered to homeowners, when we've balked at one or more aspects of an application, to have a site visit. And we are entitled to do that as a committee as long as we do not deliberate on the application while we are together at the site. So we already have in place, informally at least, or we have established, I guess I can say, a process by which we can help the homeowner ourselves to evaluate
Yeah.
their project and maybe reconsider, for example, I can think of one application in particular where there was a house on, actually there were two, where houses on 6A wanted to replace their front windows. And one of the site visits was very helpful to the homeowner, which is, I think, a large part of our responsibility and obligation to help the homeowners, in that when we went to look at the windows were fine, and they were original. And they were, in our mind, the minds of those of us who went on the committee, an asset to the house. So I see this as another layer of information is information. Whether we choose to accept the opinion or collective opinion of Protect Our Past or any other preservation or entity or interested party is entirely up to us. When applications that come before us are adjudicated by us. And then what happens afterward in terms of whether there are appeals or not is up to the applicant. So on the surface of it, without formally allying ourselves to POP or any other preservation entity, I can't see personally a problem with hearing what they have to say and allowing them to speak their piece. I know In years past, HSOY, Historical Society of Old Yarmouth, has gotten involved in trying to convince this body to protect and preserve a structure that was in danger of being demolished. So it seems to me there's precedent for it. I think there's a place for it, as long as we don't yield our power to make the final determination insofar as it resides with us. So that's how I see it.
I don't think they're even suggesting that, though, here. I think they're just saying, one of the things I found, and I've watched several meetings for over several years before I came on this committee, there are the Secretary of the Interior standards for rehabilitation that should guide every decision regarding historic structures. It is the Bible. And most, in fact, at some point in the future, I hope this committee will adopt them, because it should be in the law, quite frankly. It is what is used. If one gets federal funding for any project, not that they're here for it, they must abide by them. If there's any federal, and often state funding as well. So the problem, as I see it, in my experience, has been that owners don't know that they're building. They see a building that they see as crumbling. They have a contractor or an architect who tell them it is, and they want to move forward with it. So whatever we could do, while I would agree, Mr. Chairman, that we shouldn't be yielding our authority to anyone, having them as a resource and maybe notifying them, as I think they're asking, of a property that they could reach out on their own, independent of this body, and seek. I mean, people can say no, but seek to enlighten them. I think that would be a good thing for us to do, and responsible for us as people interested in preservation. But I agree that we shouldn't yield any of our authority or voting to
So I guess my bottom line question is, do we want to take any action on this email at this point?
I honestly don't think so. I can't picture any action we could take. I made a few notes. I could go back to my emails and see if because I think the ultimate issue from the meeting that we had with these property owners is that they have already made what they think is enough of an investment in keeping the barn up, and they're not ready to make any more investment, despite the fact that, as we noted, they have lots of land, and we suggested they might sell a small portion of their land to preserve the barn, but they feel like that's not on their agenda.
Well, even though that's a little aside from this particular thing, being that you bring it up, I will, if I may speak to that. I'm familiar with the barn. I know they've asked for it, and I'm happy I wasn't on this committee when you voted to not approve that. I will tell you, I know of one nationally known, travels around this country, structural engineer named John Watney, who travels this country dealing with historic structures, who would tell you in no uncertain terms that barn is entirely capable of being saved and rescued. I could also tell you probably 10 engineers who don't deal with historic structures who would tell you that thing needs to come down tomorrow. My point is, those engineers don't understand historic wood structures, and so it is good to protect this if we can, and that's what I think Protect Our Past is trying to do. In their mission is to make people understand that what you might think is a long lost cause is actually quite savable. And so, to that degree, that's, I think, again, I don't think they're going to be a separate arm of this committee, but that's their mission. And people, well-meaning people who have a building, are often told it has to come down. And I could get John Watney out there tomorrow. He'd put up a plan for bracing the structure in the short term, and that could be restored. So, I would agree, Mr. Chairman. I don't think we need to take any action,
right,
but I think that they absolutely are a worthy asset to us if we can somehow
So if I can,
Throw it their way.
if I can paraphrase, and I'm welcome to be corrected if I'm wrong, it's the sense of this committee that we are not going to take any formal action on this email, but that we are open to the opinion of Protect Our Past, and we can decide on a case-by-case basis whether we want to involve them or not. And they may choose to involve themselves without our asking.
Which is what happened, right?
Right.
I would only clarify to say, I would recommend that we, they're just asking to know about it, that we have a demolition permit, and I don't know when that would happen at the meeting. I'm not saying we delay, but maybe if there can be a heads up, you know,
Well,
10
it's a-
Smith Street wants to
And
demolish
all
their
our
house.
decisions are a matter of public record,
Yes,
so that would just be an additional FYI.
Yes.
So about the barn, I think we've exhausted that subject. How are we feeling about the prospects for justifying, I'm going to put it this way, for justifying our vote to deny the demolition permit for that, or application for that barn? What are we going to do, if anything, in the wake of that decision?
I don't think that as a committee, we have any power to do anything. But as individuals, I mean, I'm going to go through my emails and see if there wasn't something about a grant. And if there is, I'll try to
You
put.
can't force anybody to accept a grant.
Exactly, so
I mean, it's
it would
their
have to
property.
be.
We do our best, we tell them how good it is. This organization could offer their opinion, which would not be dispositive relative to this committee.
Yeah.
But I think they certainly know more about preservation than I do.
Yeah,
It would be good to have that kind of input, but again, it would not be dispositive to our decision on this committee.
right.
I do think, and maybe we don't discuss this tonight, but, or we do. This is a perfect example of demolition by neglect. I strongly believe there needs to be an ordinance with teeth that prevents owners from allowing their buildings to get to a point where they must be demolished. It should not be allowed. Maybe we don't have that power now, but we should have in this town a demolition by neglect ordinance with fines attached to it. Owners that choose to allow their buildings to decay to a state where they must be demolished should be heavily fined, so they either take action or they sell it. And I'm going to give you an example of where this was put into very good use and worked. In Newport, Rhode Island, there were 2 buildings on Spring Street, both 18th century houses. For decades, they sat idle. They were falling to the ground. Owners were contacted, owners were begged, owners ignored. No one lived in them. Finally, the city of Newport passed a demolition by neglect ordinance with teeth, heavy fines. Guess what happened? They sold their buildings. Those buildings are now restored.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
So this is proven to work. No one has the right to demolish their house by letting it fall to the ground, especially if it's an important building. And I've heard a lot, I have to tell you, from outside of this committee, and as a preservation architect, from people who say, well, it isn't heavy timber construction. That means nothing. Heavy timber construction for small English barns is something that was commonly used. When you get into the 19th century, in the mid-19th century, balloon framing is used to construct these enormous barns. They were never heavy timber. They are just as important and valuable as small, little, charming English barns that are heavy timber framed. So to discount this building as being unimportant because it isn't heavy timber framed is to not know what you're talking about. Here's the sad part. If someone came before us tonight and owned this property and wanted to construct a barn of this size, we would refuse it. We would refuse it because we'd say it's too massive and too large. We would refuse it if they had proof that they existed there before. We'd allow them to reconstruct it. But if they didn't, and they wanted to build a big barn where they're going to have their annual reunions of their family, we would reject it. Here it is. It exists. It's incredible square footage. it can be restored. And some owner who has the mindset could make that quite an incredible space. They're not going to have it as an agricultural barn anymore. But that's the sad irony of this. There is someone out there, I'm telling you, who would love to restore that barn, and it will be there whatever. But so I think that we as a committee must, as we move forward, put on the table at some point a demolition by neglect ordinance. I don't know how we pass it. I don't know what the legalities of that are. But this is demolition by neglect. You don't get to leave and let your barn fall to the ground. So I'm very pleased that this committee, before I was on it, rejected that. And in terms of what we do, Mr. Chairman, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know what pressure we have, but there we are.
Well,
I
that's...
didn't mean to be passionate about it, but I am.
No, who could tell that? Well, as I am wont to say, Rome wasn't built in a day. It's an ideal, but we have to work toward it. We have a long way to go, and a lot of it has to do with getting information out there, education. We need to educate those who are willing to be educated, and luckily that has happened on a one-on-one basis with applicants in the past. It would be good to have a strong working relationship with the building department.
Absolutely.
And the building inspector, and maybe have a meeting and sit down and discuss these matters and get their read and tell them what our take is.
I think that's an excellent suggestion.
In the meantime, about this barn,
What were you thinking, sir?
I'm still thinking. So I'm gonna focus back on the subject at hand, which is the barn. And we've taken the first step, which is to stop the demolition. But as you pointed out, Mr. Vice Chairman, the demolition is already taking place by neglect. So the clock is ticking, and the question is, how are we going to help the homeowner? Because I think that was the sense of the meeting. How are we going to help the homeowner come up with something palatable that would enable that barn to be saved? And that's the daunting question. They have a lot of property. By their own assessment, 23 acres. Some feel it could be more. And that property is largely unused. So I had, this is my own thought, an idea that perhaps the owners might be willing to make a deal with the town, or town would be perfect if it could happen.
Agreed.
Give the town the land. They would realize a substantial tax break, one would think, by doing so.
Do you mean the immediate environs of the house and barn?
Yes, they have 23 acres that contingent to that barn. That's just one idea. You know, maybe what should happen or could happen is that we have a brainstorming meeting and maybe protect our past. I have no question, no reservation about them being involved, and just talk about how we can, even at this 11th hour, first stabilize that barn to buy more time, and then convince the homeowners that it's in their own interest, maybe even financial interest, to preserve that barn. Because right now, I think, and one hates to put words in anyone's mouth, or ideas in anyone else's head, but I think they view it as an albatross, and they just like it gone. So, it's a matter of education.
I like
We
your-
need to try to
It is.
see if we can educate and convince them that there is a solution that would make everybody happy. And maybe that's a Pollyanna point of view, but that would,
It's certainly worth exploring.
okay.
A working session sounds
And
great.
into what Ms. Argo said, I don't know if they are, perhaps we should ask Protect Our Past, you talked about a grant. Perhaps there is funding that is available for the emergency stabilization of the structure to prevent, I mean, obviously there's a giant hole in the roof, so waters, but prevent walls from caving in, to just stabilize it so there's no further structural damage that causes it to collapse on itself. That might be a question to ask, because I don't know if there's funding available from
Who's
them
the
either.
recipient of the grant?
Well, that's a good question.
We're all, it would have to be some kind of, contract
Because
to
I
fix
can't imagine
them.
any homeowner that's got 23 acres of land in that area is going to qualify for a grant.
Good point.
You mean because they would,
You guys are multimillionaires, so
but
even with the land
if
alone.
if they're focusing on the barn, maybe it would be, here's what you have to do with this money.
Well,
don't
to,
know.
to the chairman's mention, I think you're right. I think it is an albatross. So perhaps who, Mr. Chairman, would have that, who would do that reach out to say, would you consider, gifting or selling it to the town for $1 or something of this nature?
Well, obviously, you have to connect the dots first and find out if there's an interest on the part of the town. If there's not an interest on the part of the town, then there's some other conservation entity somewhere that would have an interest. Would Historic New England have? I don't think so, but, and obviously, we're not going to be able to solve this tonight.
Well, you
So,
might find the owner. I mean, perhaps you'd have an organization. I agree with you that there's 23 acres north of 6A on the water, pretty good spot of land. That stated, perhaps some money might be donated with the agreement of a preservation easement being placed on the barn to the owners that have it. So in the short term, money is given. They sign a preservation easement committing to preserve it and to not demolish it. I don't know.
That sounds good. That's the kind of working session
All right.
thought process.
okay.
Could we move to have a meeting with us and perhaps the folks that Protect Our Past who have this, invite them here to speak with us regarding this very particular case?
Should we be the governing body for that? Or should we, I would be more comfortable with having them
Well, either-
conduct the meeting, and we could be present rather
Protect
than.
our past.
Yeah. I'd have to think about, and maybe talk
Conflict
to
of
our lawyer
interests and-
about this,
yeah.
and how this could be structured so that,
Not overstepping.
right.
May I
Good
ask
way of
you,
putting it.
when does this
Come back.
when does it expire, our
Remember,
demolition?
Lisa, when this demolition, it
6
was.
months, I thought?
I thought it was 6 months, but I'm not sure.
The town's ordinance is 6 months.
So,
Okay,
and it was it September when we,
I think it was later.
okay.
I think it was November.
Or November.
All right.
Well, I would be willing, one-on-one, not in my capacity as
Chair.
chairman of this committee, but as a citizen in the town of Yarmouth, to approach Ellen and ask her if she would be willing to think about this, maybe set an agenda, and maybe schedule a meeting.
We could
of-
invite the Board of Selectmen, too. Invite.
Could invite anybody and everybody.
Yeah.
And the more the merrier.
Well, may I ask if we all, I would also volunteer as a citizen, but were we all to be at a meeting, the selectmen included, where we're discussing something, business has been before us, are we then having a meeting?
We would have to post it, but that's not a big deal. And, you post it 48 hours and you have,
That's why I suggested maybe if it was Protect Our Past that was
We're not-
conducting the
we'd
meeting,
still
then we
have-
wouldn't have to post anything. So,
I have had in the past, I run a thing called Energy Committees of the Cape and Islands. And we meet, and there's definitely more, there's quorums of every town's energy committee, and we don't post them. So I'll look into that.
All right.
That would be helpful.
Okay. So anyway, I suggest we move on to the last,
Yeah.
yes?
And before we move to adjourn,
No, I'm not moving to adjourn. I have one more item to discuss. But go ahead. Do you have something?
yes, I wanted to inform this group, because I want to be totally transparent, that I have worked in the past with Julian Sears' office, and I'm working again with legislators. And that was why the commission went forward, as Mr. Gegenworth said, with the exemption idea. But the exemption idea is not solving the problem with the solar. So Julian and the House representatives are back at working at legislation. I want to keep you informed.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So the only other item I have is that I did represent this committee and the town of Yarmouth at an appeal last week of a decision made by the town of Yarmouth Old Kings Highway Committee to deny an application for a rebuild of a house that they had previously voted to accept the demolition, for which they had previously voted to accept the demolition. And by the way, Protect Our Past surveyed the house and agreed that it was not important to salvage it. And this is a house on Old County Road in Sandwich, which is a very long road that basically extends from the Mid-Cape to Route 6A. It's an old historic road, but I drove both directions, northerly direction and the southerly direction, and looked at all the houses, and it's not a homogeneous road. There are houses of different eras and different degrees of architectural merit. And so there were some concerns about the actual design of the house. Specifically, there's a very prominent garage that faces the road, a two-car garage, and the house is a relatively small house. So there was concern by the Sandwich Committee not to approve the application to build this house because of the prominence of the garage, especially in relationship to the house. What we decided as a group was to remand the decision back to the town of Sandwich Old Kings Highway Committee for further review to see if something could be worked out with the builder to reduce the visual impact of the garage and hopefully make all parties happy. The vote was 3-2. I voted in favor of remanding. Two of the members from two of the other towns voted to reverse the town of Yarmouth's Sandwich's decision and allow the structure to be built. So that's it. Do I hear?
Well, wait, Mr.
Yeah.
Chairman, if I could just add, I just want to add to what I said. As you see, I'm a very stoic person. I just want to add to what you said about working related to that barn and just in general. I agree with you in sort of what you were getting at. I believe that this committee should be a resource and an asset to the citizens here, and that we should be a helping hand to them. It's unfortunate that the barn that we're just talking about got into that case, but in the fullness of time, as we work through these months together and hopefully years together, I hope we will be able to put on workshops and other things to the degree that we can educate, as you put earlier, folks on this. So I think most people are well-meaning, and they come before us wanting to do the right thing, and sometimes they don't have the resources or they don't know what to do. So rather than just being reactionary effectively to applications, I'd like us at some point in the future to be a little more proactive in maybe putting ourselves out there in some kind of workshop or presentation that we do at least once a year, where we can help people understand that preservation issue, which is a complex one. And for most people, They don't really understand it, and it can be very daunting to look at an old house that looks like it's falling down with plaster falling and not see that actually there's a real jewel there. One of the things I frequently do, I'll be driving by homes with friends and they'll be in really bad shape, and I'll say, "What a beautiful house." And they'll say, "That thing?" And I'll say, "You didn't, under all of that, it's a really spectacular Georgian house." And that's what I see. And if we can get, in all of our shared love, we volunteer our time, folks in this community to look at that house, maybe not be able to see it with the eye that I do, but look at it and see it as an opportunity to, preserve and protect yet another of the really special places we have here. I think we'll be doing a great service to everyone.
Okay. So,
I move to adjourn.
Second?
okay, all in favor?
Aye.
And I,
Excellent.
we are adjourned.